Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. You know, there's something surprisingly relatable about the second season of Andor, which isn't something you can usually say about Star Wars. Like, no one watches the prequels and says, oh yeah, I totally relate with Anakin's character. No one actually relates with him. No one was conceived in some miraculously force-powered, immaculate conception. You didn't grow up with a bomb implanted in your head because you were a child slave. You aren't the answer to some ancient prophecy that will significantly change the geopolitical and economic landscape of the galaxy. You know what? Not only do I not relate with Anakin Skywalker, screw him. I'm tired of super beings or room temperature IQ being chosen by some random sketchy higher power to decide the fate of the galaxy. You're not Anakin, I'm not Anakin. We're the schmucks stuck in traffic on our way to our second job because we don't want to lose our apartment and get kicked down into the underworld because we're behind on rent again. As Anakin comes crashing through from low orbit in half of a separatist warship doing Jedi superhero nonsense that probably ends up affecting our lives greatly or gets us killed. The characters in Andor, on the other hand, are far more grounded in reality. They mostly have shitty lives, shitty jobs, and overbearing mothers. For many of these characters, their entire lives, the sacrifices they're going to make are going to be inconsequential. And when they do die, most of them are going to end up forgotten as tiny dark stains on the side of an Imperial-class Star Destroyer. And that kind of fatalism is kind of healthy in small amounts, right? In all honesty, one of the biggest problems in our world today, thanks to social media and just traditional media, is that everyone thinks they're the main character. Whereas most of us are realistically, at best, background characters with limited dialogue. And should we stick our necks out, overact our tiny roles a little bit? Boom. Little dark stain on the side of an Imperial-class Star Destroyer. In Andor Season 2, we follow two couples deeply immersed in the cloak and dagger world of espionage in the early days of the Galactic Civil War. And on the surface, there are a lot of similarities between these two couples. We have Cassie and Andor reigniting an old flame with Bix Callahan. It's not a perfect relationship, it's not even planned. It's the result of two individuals being crushed together by the indiscriminate boot of Imperial tyranny, and just finding each other in their moments of need. Then we have Dedra Meero and Cyril Karn, who start an equally unplanned relationship. Again, we have two individuals whose lives are driven by trauma and cross paths, accidentally creating a relationship of convenience. It's odd how war and chaos creates couples like this, but I do think it's very realistic. I mean, the amount of couples I know that started their relationship during COVID is pretty high. I mean, there's really nothing that gets the juices flowing more than societal collapse and warfare. I guess our evolutionary need to survive is stronger than we'd like to think. So Cyril and Dedra, or Cedra, and Andor and Bix, or Annex, I don't know if these couples get together without conflict. And so, as the galaxy slowly falls apart, these two couples find themselves pulled into the Galactic Civil War, working in the intelligence field on the opposite side of the lines from one another. Now, there is a perk to this dangerous employment, a surprising perk that I wouldn't expect to find in such a dystopian universe, and that is employment-related housing. And honestly, if you know how overpriced and expensive Coruscant housing is, it's not surprising that, free housing would secure an individual's undying loyalty, right? Dedra Meero is comfortably housed in an ISB-owned apartment with beautiful views of the Coruscant skyline. I wouldn't be surprised if the ISB owned the entire building. You see, entities like the ISB, with their unnatural powers and very vague directives, are terrific at seizing assets of the citizenry. Probably got this entire structure for free after cracking down on some degenerate alien real estate owner who doesn't really fit the image of the New Order's idea of what an Imperial citizen should look like. The apartment is absolutely beautiful upon first glance. It seems like modular construction in Star Wars, just like here on Earth, is extremely popular. Instead of building units from the ground up, this tower looks to be made out of pre-assembled circular modules, which are then kind of lifted in place and pieced together, with each module comprising one living space. This lowers the cost and time of construction. Usually when you put up a building, the exterior and the actual structure of the building is the easiest part. It's the furnishings, doing the wiring, the heating, and gas lines. That's the most difficult part. So if you can assemble everything before you actually install it, it makes making a building as easy as assembling Legos. Well, not really, but you get the point. What we get as a result is a very standard Imperial classical spherical shape, which leads to a relatively open floor plan with very generous wide sweeping windows in multiple rooms that provides a panoramic view worth millions of credits, or so I assume. It's what you would call in our world luxury, or modern luxury, a term I will explain a little bit later. Cassian Andor, on the other hand, is holed up in one of Axis Network's old safe houses, located in Tom Kick Towers, Plate 7, Grid 3561 East, on level 5124. It's a surface dwelling, which is kinda neat. Luthen talks about using this safe house many times in the past with Clea, and I imagine even back then the apartment was still just as dilapidated and forgotten as it is currently, as this building has all the signs of public or low-income housing. As you approach this little pocket neighborhood, you'll notice the typical gleaming floor-to-window skyscrapers you see on Coruscant, but around Tom Kick Tower, you can see a lot of similar-looking buildings, almost pyramid-shaped buildings with the same drab-looking exterior. It's probably also a modular build, but much cheaper than Dedra's apartment. Just look at how tiny the windows are on these units. I guess these apartments were built before Iradu flooded the market with cheap lamite, which produces transparent steel. Once you get a bit closer, it becomes clear that this building isn't completely occupied. You have dark hallways with no lighting, plastic wrap over incomplete remodeling efforts. I wouldn't be surprised that the original operator of this building went bankrupt many years ago. Maybe it was a low-income housing project back when the Coruscant government still at least attempted to go through the motions of taking care of the populace and the poor. Now, despite what you hear on the internet about real estate development, it is an extremely risky venture, and it's nowhere near as lucrative as people think it is. We only see the successful individuals, usually psychopaths, who are willing to claw and get the maximum margin so they actually can survive. But we don't hear about all the failed apartment projects that probably outnumber the successful ones in the world. Especially projects like this where you have to deal with all sorts of government permitting and bureaucracy. I mean, imagine the consequences of a crane falling from the 5,000th floor of Coruscant, the amount of damage it could do by the time it hits the lower levels. If you want to make money in Coruscant, invest in scaffolding. Anyway, most likely after the bankruptcy of this building, some private equity firm came in, maybe even Damas Holdings itself, bought the building at pennies on the credit and just added it to its growing portfolio of distressed properties in prime real estate positions. This building is not about collecting rents from the tenant. It's not about the building itself. It's really about the value of the land that this building is on, which, of course, because it's on the surface, is kind of invaluable. I mean, you see all of the luxury high-rises surrounding these tenant buildings, and you can see what the future has in store for this building. In this way, both Luthen and the ISB probably obtained these properties at a much cheaper rate than market value because of the extenuating circumstances affecting the galaxy. Imperial corruption led to the ISB, probably seizing a really nice building. And late Republic economic decay, bureaucracy, and corruption leads to Luthen's safe house. Just a nice example about how government policy actually does affect the common person, despite what people might tell you otherwise. Although the clear difference here is the ISB's ownership of their apartment is due to its predatory nature, whereas Luthen's real estate purchase seems to be more of an opportunist move. Another similarity between these two couples is that the apartments they inhabit hide a certain truth about the relationships they have. Dedra Meero's unit is definitely going to be the more expensive of the pair. The ISB apartments remind me of like new luxury high-rises in Hudson Yards, Midtown Manhattan. Whereas the Axis Network's crash pad is definitely a bit more Queens or Brooklyn. Something straight out of LaFrex City or, Trump Village on Coney Island. Not Donald, but his father Fred, who built his family's fortune actually being a slumlord in Brooklyn back in the day. But take a closer look at Dedra's units. Is this actually real luxury? No, it's mass luxury. Remember when we were kids and only really rich people actually had mansions? Only really rich people had top-of-the-line luxury automobiles and the best sports cars. It just wasn't something obtainable by even the upper middle class. Now, if you go to your average suburban neighborhood, you'll see McMansions all over the place, and in the driveway, you'll see 4 sports cars, which are all leased. Same thing with all those luxury apartment high-rises that are popping up everywhere in America. To the untrained eye, mass luxury mimics real luxury. But once you look closer, you notice the difference. cheaper building materials, much smaller floor plans, shitty appliances, thinner walls, and terrible insulation on the windows. I mean, like I said, Dedra's apartment looks modular, which is kind of a red flag here. Real luxury doesn't do modular, they do custom made all throughout. You want to see luxury? Take a look at our last video about Mon Mothma's apartment. This is really the illusion of the Empire paints for its followers. It takes the most wretched and broken people who grew up with nothing, and it gives them a little bit of something, this fake luxury in order to secure their loyalty, and it oftentimes works. I mean, what would poor Dedra and Cyril know about real luxury? Dedra grew up in a kinder block, which I imagine is some kind of juvenile detention center. Dedra's probably just happy that she doesn't have to use a toilet in a room full of like 20 people. You know? She doesn't notice the cheap and Spartan-looking materials that make up the interior walls of her unit or the barely polished trim on the doors and windows. She's probably comforted by the fact that the inside of her dining room looks like a typical hallway on an Imperial-class Star Destroyer or inside of a Kinder block. Doesn't mind that our unit comes with built-in light fixtures and appliances that are just standard equipment that's, painted over with some white paint to make it look a little nicer. And yeah, therein lies the reality of the situation. Yeah, you can give these two a beautiful looking apartment, make them both clean up a little bit. I mean, heck, Dedra even tries to smile, which almost cracks her face in half. But like everything in the situation, it's all artificial. This isn't a reward for a loyal servant to the Empire, it's government subsidized housing. A building that costs the Empire almost nothing to acquire, but also allows them to pay their workers lower wages because they're thankful for the housing. The unit's beautiful view is a distraction from the fact that the ISB has probably bugged these houses so that they can keep track of their most high-ranking supervisors. It's not a privilege to be in this position, it is a curse. This isn't a home, it's a sacrificial altar in the sky, a prison with transparent windows for all to see in. I'm sure the previous tenants of Dedra's apartment were also high-ranking ISB officials until they weren't and, thrown into Narkina 5. And this isn't a real relationship between a loving adult and a woman. This is a praying mantis relationship. If you don't understand what that means, well, you see, male praying mantis are generally smaller than their female counterparts, and when they mate, the male usually approaches the female carefully because any attempt to mount her can lead to their decapitation. Although, interestingly enough, male praying mantis can still survive without their head, and this is because they have like a miniature secondary brain in their chest, which, keeps their mating organs alive until he finishes the deed. Talk about dedication. By the way, someone needs to tell Imperial starship designers about this idea, a secondary bridge in the belly of a vessel after the head gets cut off, the bridge on the tower getting taken out by an A-wing. A design like that would have saved a lot of lives. But yeah, Cyril and Dedra's life only looks perfect when one is making the most surface level observation. This relationship is as cold as the sterile, undecorated walls of the kitchen. Now on the flip side, Cassian and Bix, Bindor, Cassix, are brought together as fugitives of the Empire. They reignite old feelings in a way that only danger and close proximity can. Now, at first glance, the apartment with its exposed ceiling and scuffed floors, lack of lighting, and just overall dankness, and not the good dank like the sticky icky, but just moist, makes this apartment seem awful. You can smell the dust in the air almost, and imagine the caked grime on the windowsills. It's not a place you would invite your mom over to meet your significant other over brunch. And at least initially, Bix and Cassian really don't seem like they're enjoying living there either. And that might be more due to the fact that they are fugitives on the run, but just like Cyril and Dedra, the two attempt to play house together. Bix attempts to soothe her own PTSD and trauma with some self-medication and decorating.
I still need to do something about these windows.
Yeah.
Bix and Cassian's enemies, the state, is actively hunting them. They are oppressed and forced to make this dingy home their fortress against tyranny. It's a very overwhelming enemy for them to fight, but it is an external fight. The Empire is kind of a foreign disease that is affecting their way of life. A direct contrast to the real existential angst that Dedra feels because of her horrific upbringing and the internal problems that Cyril Karn feels because of his overbearing mother. Cyril, just like Bix, tries his best to appear comfortable in his new home, but the signs of his discomfort are everywhere. Panoramic views of the city and gleaming white floors aren't going to fix childhood trauma. Now, you probably want to hear me continue on this train of thought. Everything in Cyril and Dedra's relationship is fake, reflecting the true nature of their government-furnished apartment in Midtown. A direct contrast to Andor and Bix's real love and relationship. Sure, their apartment is more shoddy, but, it takes a lot more than nice furnishings to make a house a home. Except that's not it, really. I mean, there are feelings between Bix and Cassian during their time on Coruscant, but it becomes clear very immediately that Bix isn't suited for this life as a rebel. It seems like Bix is more concerned with just having a normal life and, dare I say, settle down and start a family with Cassian. Well, Cassian is basically constantly paranoid and watching over his shoulder for ISB officers. He's so concerned with losing Bix that he's making her life miserable here.
I can't sleep, you can't shop. The mission is dinner. I think we can handle it.
They really do sound like your typical couple with a newborn. There are small victories, of course, for both couples. Dedra eventually wins Cyril from his mother, whatever that means. You know, out of the pressure cooker into the smoker. Either way, Cyril is cooked. Biggs does also end up tidying up their little apartment in Tomkick Towers. She even puts some decoration on the windowsill. And the two play house. They divide chores and tasks. Bix maintains the weapons, Cassian cooks the food. They fall into a routine. They even have a shopping list.
Look at this place. You cleaned it up.
We're here, might as well.
Yeah, the flowers.
They're expensive, but they are beautiful. The trip, okay?
Different.
But just like Cyril and Dedra, this is also kind of a facade. It's not that their love is fake, it's just that Bix isn't a dotting housewife preparing the home for her husband to return because he's been away on a business trip. And Cassian isn't a traveling salesperson. He's analyzing revolutionary movements for recruitment into a rebellion. And they both kill people for a living now. And very quickly, things kind of fall apart for these two as well. Not because they're incompatible like Cyril and Dedra, but because the rebellion depends so much on Cassian not settling down and having a family. Yes, Bix does the brave and respectful thing by leaving Cassian, but the end result remains the same. A broken relationship and an empty apartment. Which shows us the inherent problem with imperial rule, authoritarianism. In the long run, this is not a way to run a civilization. This show was never designed to highlight the evil of any individual. We have villains, sure, like Dedra and Cyril, but really they're just people. Maybe not ordinary people, they're really freaking weird, but definitely not inherently evil, but victims of the system that they grew up in and the very limited options they've had in life. The show isn't about blaming individuals, which I think is more important in today's media environment than ever. This is a show about how ordinary people struggle in poorly made systems. Because by their nature, authoritarian governments like this are parasitic and destroy the people they rule. That's why authoritarian governments always eventually collapse because of internal rot. These types of governments steal from their populace. They try to control and deeply mistrust the common man and woman. They even look at those loyal to their cause with suspicion. In the end, these apartments, despite initial appearance, aren't so different because of the city they're located in, Coruscant, because of the government that is in charge of this city, the Empire. Dedra's home in the sky is a hollow reward for all the horrific things she's done in order to ascend the ISB ladder. What should be a comforting home is a sterile place where her employers can surveil her and control her every actions until they discard her like trash. Luthen's safe house is supposed to hide Cassian and Bix from the Empire, but instead delivers a cruel taste of what life could actually be like if the Empire was gone and they were normal people and not fugitives on the run. Both of these couples, opponents of the Empire, loyal servants of the Empire, live in fear. A deep and existential fear that their lives, their future is uncertain. And so they can't do what normal people do. Make human connections, make friendships, make careers, fall in love, start a family. You know, when you're so down on Maslow's hierarchy of needs that you're just trying to scrape by, you can't focus on the important things in life, the things that really make us feel alive. And this is the Empire's fault, and this is why it always fails. A home is more than just a box with things in it. It's a box that's connected to other boxes, which creates a neighborhood, a town, a society that actually encourages positive human interaction. The Empire doesn't understand this. It can build apartments, maintain infrastructure. It can even control the people. It can take away every freedom we have, but it can't soothe our hearts. It can't make us feel whole. It can't make us feel safe and secure enough so that we can move beyond just surviving. The people who run these types of authoritarian governments, they don't understand humanity. They're cynical about the morality and ethics of the common man. They don't trust others. They don't trust anyone. They're driven not by optimism for the future, but pessimism of what happens when humanity gets together and tries to achieve great things. They're full of fear and not hope. They're immersed in anger rather than happiness over their own achievements and successes. And they need to be stopped, if not for our own futures, but for the future of the next generation and the generations that come after that. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time.